Chapter 33. They sent the instructions to Damon, then settled in for an anxious wait. The hours stretched uncomfortably as they monitored police frequencies and news channels for any indication of Douglas's response. The electronic hum of equipment seemed to grow louder in the tense silence, punctuated only by occasional updates from pack members and the soft sounds of movement as they shifted positions around the table. Isabella found herself repeatedly drifting toward the evidence wall, reviewing documents they'd already organized. The paper rustled beneath her fingers, familiar and grounding amid uncertainty. The texture of legal documents, a mixture of smooth modern prints and rough photocopies, felt reassuring beneath her touch, tangible evidence of their case. Just after 3 p.m., activity erupted across their monitoring systems. The sudden cacophony of alerts shattered the room's tense quiet. Pings from news feeds, the crackle of police radio communications, and the vibration of secure messages arriving simultaneously. Police frequencies exploded with coded communications that Harper translated for them, his knowledge of departmental codes proving invaluable. News alerts began popping up on their screens. Breaking, federal agents raid mayor's office, and chief prosecutor called in for questioning in corruption probe. "It's happening," Sophia breathed, fingers flying across her keyboard as she pulled up multiple news sources. Monitors filled with live footage from various agencies, the screen's blue glow reflecting off every face in the room. Live footage showed FBI agents escorting several city officials from City Hall in handcuffs. Reporters crowded around, shouting unanswered questions as the officials were placed in unmarked vehicles. Isabella recognized several faces, administrators who had suddenly stopped taking her calls when the accusations against her first emerged. The scene had a surreal quality. Familiar faces from her professional life now being led away as criminals. "Douglas came through," Isabella said, relief washing through her. The knot building at the base of her neck for hours began to ease. "And moving quickly," Harper added, professional appreciation evident in his tone. "No leaks, no warnings to the targets. Professional operation." He studied the screen, nodding slight approval at the agent's tactics. A new message appeared from Damon, the alert chime now carrying a note of triumph rather than anxiety. "Douglas is legit. Evidence prompted immediate action. He still wants to meet with you tomorrow. A safe house has been prepared with federal security. He believes your testimony is crucial to the case against the mayor. Do you accept?" Isabella looked up from the message to find everyone watching her, waiting for her decision. The weight of their collective gaze pressed upon her, but instead of feeling burdened, she felt strengthened by their trust. "This is our chance," she said firmly. "I need to take it." "Not alone," Mikhail stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. His stance had subtly shifted to emphasize his physical presence. The air around him seemed to crackle with contained energy, his restraint more impressive than any outburst. "Douglas won't allow a civilian at a protected witness meeting," Harper pointed out. He'd crossed his arms over his chest. His breathing had become slightly labored, the long day taking its toll on his injured body. "Then I won't be visible," Mikhail replied, eyes flashing briefly with supernatural amber. The momentary glow was dramatic in the cool light of the war room, a reminder of the power contained within his seemingly human form. Isabella understood his concern. His need to protect her was both personal and instinctual. The alpha wolf unwilling to let his mate walk into potential danger alone. But she also knew Douglas well enough to recognize that bringing an unauthorized person to a federal meeting could damage their credibility. "We need to find a compromise," she said carefully. "Douglas needs to hear my testimony directly, but I understand your concerns for my safety." After considerable discussion, a plan took shape. Isabella would meet with Douglas at the designated safe house, but the pack would secure the perimeter, with Mikhail positioned close enough to intervene if necessary. They would offer that Harper accompany Isabella as a second witness, his police credentials providing additional legitimacy. As preparations continued into the evening, Isabella noticed Harper watching Mikhail with a thoughtful expression. The detective's assessment active. His gaze tracked the alpha's movements with professional analysis rather than personal wariness. A subtle but significant shift from his initial reactions. The Warren's lighting had dimmed again to simulate evening, casting longer shadows and creating pockets of privacy within the larger space. "Something on your mind, detective?" she asked when they had a moment apart from the others. They stood near a water cooler, the quiet burble of bubbles rising through the jug, creating a small island of white noise that offered some privacy. Harper hesitated, then spoke quietly. "You and Volkov. It's more than just allies of convenience." It wasn't a question, but Isabella answered anyway, seeing no point in deception with someone as observant as Harper, especially considering their history. "Yes." She kept her response simple, offering no elaboration. The cool water in her cup provided a focus point, something to look at besides Harper's two perceptive eyes. "You understand what that means? Involving yourself with someone like him." His tone wasn't accusatory, but carried genuine concern. "I understand better than you might think," she replied evenly, meeting his gaze. Harper studied her face. "I've seen a lot of prosecutors over the years, Santos. Good ones, bad ones, corrupt ones. You were always one of the best. Unwavering commitment to justice, even when it was career suicide." He glanced toward Mikhail, his assessment continuing. "Just ensure you're not losing sight of that justice in all this." The gesture encompassed the supernatural sanctuary around them, the movement causing him to wince slightly as it pulled at his injured side. Isabella bristled slightly, pride prickling at the implication. The plastic cup crackled slightly in her tightening grip. "My definition of justice has expanded, James, not disappeared. I've seen both worlds now. The corruption in our system and the integrity in theirs. The real question isn't whether I can still serve justice, but what does justice truly mean in a world more complex than we ever imagined?" The words emerged with conviction that surprised even her, articulating an evolution in her thinking she hadn't fully acknowledged to herself. Harper didn't respond immediately, seeming to consider her words carefully. The silence between them was filled with the ambient sounds of their surroundings. Distant conversations, the hum of equipment, the occasional burst of radio chatter. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough." Sophia interrupted the conversation with her call. "Everyone! You need to see this." Her urgency immediately drew their attention. They gathered around the primary monitor, where a live news broadcast showed the chief prosecutor stepping up to a podium outside City Hall. The room fell silent except for the reporter's voice and the occasional sound of keyboards as Sophia captured the footage. Rogers appeared haggard, but composed, his expression grim, yet determined as he addressed the assembled reporters with a practiced public speaking cadence. In light of disturbing evidence brought to my attention by federal investigators, I am announcing my immediate resignation as chief prosecutor. The allegations of corruption within our city government are serious and warrant a complete and transparent investigation. While I maintain my innocence, stepping aside is in the best interest of justice and the people of Atlanta. He's trying to save himself, Harper said disgustedly, distancing himself from the mayor and others before the full evidence comes out. His jaw tightened, the personal vendetta element of his investigation evident in his clenched fists. His knuckles whitened with tension, old bloodstains still visible in the creases. "It won't work," Isabella replied, a cold satisfaction in her voice. "The recordings explicitly implicate him in the conspiracy. This is just his last desperate attempt to control the narrative." The harsh fluorescent light of the monitors highlighted Roger's false sincerity, making his performance all the more transparent to her experienced eye. "Mayor Collier hasn't been seen publicly yet," Sophia noted, switching between news channels with practiced efficiency. Fingers dancing across the keyboard. The rapid clicking provided an anxious counterpoint to the scripted statements coming from the speakers. "He won't be," Katerina predicted, her assessment delivered with certainty. Her posture remained alert, predator sensing weakness in prey. Men like that don't face consequences. They run. As if confirming her assessment, a breaking news alert appeared. Mayor's chief of staff reports him missing, last seen leaving City Hall shortly before federal raid. The bold caption seemed to pulse with urgency across the bottom of the screen. "He's running," Harper stated flatly, the detective's conclusion matching Katerina's. His expression darkened, and his fingers tapped against his thigh. "Let him," Isabella said, already calculating advantages. "Every step he takes digs his grave deeper. Federal agents don't take kindly to fleeing suspects." Another message arrived from Damon, the soft chime drawing their attention back to the tablet. "Douglas is impressed with the evidence and says that your testimony makes the case solid. The meeting is still on for tomorrow at 10 a.m. The safe house location will be sent 1 hour before. He is pleased to hear Detective Harper is alive and willing to testify." Isabella relayed the message to Harper, who nodded immediately, determination hardening his features. "I've been building this case for 3 years. Damned if I'll miss seeing it through." "Then we're set," Isabella said, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Tomorrow, we start bringing them all down." The room seemed to brighten with collective purpose, the air charged with anticipation. As the group dispersed to make final preparations, Isabella felt a momentary sense of vertigo at how quickly events were moving. Just days ago, she had been a fugitive, her reputation destroyed, her career in ruins. Now the tide was turning, justice advancing with surprising speed. The familiar exhilaration of building a successful case returned, but colored differently by her new understanding of the world's complexity. She felt Mikhail's presence before she saw him, that inexplicable awareness that had developed between them. Her body recognized him somehow. A shift in the air, a scent too subtle for conscious detection, perhaps something even more primal. Second thoughts. he asked quietly, standing beside her. His voice carried none of the alpha authority he showed others, only genuine concern and respect for her decision. His warmth radiated against her side, a physical reminder of his presence. "Not about exposing the corruption," she replied, honesty coming easily with him despite her habitual guardedness. "But after—" Her hand unconsciously moved to touch the DA badge she no longer carried, phantom muscle memory of a former identity. The gesture felt empty, the absence more telling than any possession could be. His expression softened. "The pack will always have a place for you, Isabella. But I understand if you must first reclaim your place in the human world." In the dimmed evening lighting, his features seemed more relaxed, the sharp lines of authority softening into something more tender. The simple acceptance in his voice, his willingness to let her find her path, even if it temporarily took her away from him, touched her deeply. Most men she'd known would have pressured, insisted, and tried to direct her decision. His respect for her autonomy only strengthened her connection to him. "I don't know if I can go back to who I was before," she admitted, voicing the thought that had been surfacing repeatedly. That Isabella didn't know werewolves existed, didn't understand pack loyalty, or the complexity of supernatural politics. She turned to face him directly, allowing more emotion to show than she typically permitted herself. "She didn't know you." Mikhail reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was tender, intimate in its restrained power. His fingertips grazed her cheek, leaving warmth in their wake. "You don't have to choose right now. Clearing your name is the first step. The rest will follow." Before she could respond, the secure system chimed with an urgent alert. Sophia's voice called out from the communications center, panic breaking through her usual nervous energy. "Emergency broadcast on police channels. All units are responding to the shooting at the federal building. Multiple casualties reported. FBI agents among the injured." They rushed to the monitors, watching in horror as footage showed chaos outside the federal building. Ambulances, police vehicles, panicked civilians running. The screens were filled with flashing lights and chaos, reporters struggling to make sense of the unfolding tragedy while staying clear of danger. Isabella's stomach clenched with dread for those involved, and for Damon. "What happened?" Isabella demanded, stepping forward instinctively. The sudden adrenaline surge made her voice sharper than intended, cutting through the room's commotion. Sophia adjusted the feeds, pulling up the initial reports, fingers moving frantically across controls. "Coordinated attack on U.S. attorney offices, multiple shooters. Early reports suggest at least 3 dead. Including—" She broke off, glancing at Isabella with the shock evident in her widened eyes. The blue light from the screens made her face look ghostly, emphasizing her horrified expression. "Who?" Isabella pressed, though she already sensed the answer from Sophia's expression. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, bracing herself. The wood felt solid beneath her fingers, an anchor against the rising tide of dread. "Prosecutor Douglas," Sophia confirmed grimly. "He was killed in his office along with 2 federal agents." The words fell into the room like stones, heavy and irrevocable, creating shock among everyone. A heavy silence fell over the group as the implications became clear. Their plan, their hopes for justice through legitimate channels, had just been violently derailed. First, Isabella felt like the room she was in suddenly tilted on its axis, she had meant to confirm that Douglas wasn't part of the corruption. Instead, she had gotten him and several of his agents killed. She had to fight back a wave of nausea. "This isn't random," Harper said, breaking the silence, the detective's analysis cutting through shock. "This is them eliminating witnesses and investigators." His voice carried absolute certainty, muscles tensed, as though preparing for action despite his injury. Beneath his borrowed shirt, a small stain of fresh blood appeared where his wound had reopened with his sudden movement. "Damon!" Isabella gasped, sudden fear gripping her as the connection formed in her mind. The image of his nervous smile and perpetually askew glasses flashed in her mind, followed immediately by images from crime scenes where witnesses had been silenced. "He was meeting with Douglas today. Is there any word?" Sophia shook her head, anxiety evident in her rapid movements. "Nothing yet." Her fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard, frantically searching for any mention of him in the early reports. Isabella grabbed the secure tablet and sent an urgent message with fingers that shook slightly despite her effort to maintain composure. "Damon! Status check immediately." Agonizing minutes passed with no response. The only sounds in the room were the continued reports from the news broadcasts, Sophia's frantic typing, and the steady tick of an analog clock on the wall, each second stretching unbearably. Isabella felt her heart hammering against her ribs, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios with methodical thoroughness. The faces of witnesses lost in previous cases flashed through her memory. People she'd failed to protect adequately. "We need to assume he's compromised," Katerina said finally. Her voice hard, but not unkind, tactical assessment, overriding sentiment. "If he were in that building..." She left the implication hanging, her practical nature refusing to offer false hope. "We don't know that," Isabella interrupted sharply, unwilling to accept the conclusion without evidence. Her hand raised in a cutting motion, a courtroom gesture for objection. The sudden movement sent a file folder sliding off the table, papers scattering across the floor with a disruptive flutter. "Isabella," Mikhail said gently, touching her shoulder. The weight was grounding, his warmth penetrating the cold dread that had settled within her. "We need to prepare for the possibility." She nodded stiffly, pushing aside emotion to focus on the next steps. "If Damon is dead or captured, we've lost our primary channel to the federal authorities." Her voice sounded distant to her ears, shock creating a strange detachment. "And potentially exposed our location and plans," Katerina added, her body shifting unconsciously toward defensive positioning. "We need to move," Mikhail decided, alpha authority returning fully to his voice. "Immediately. The Warren could be compromised." His decision rippled through the room, pack members straightening, responding instinctively to their alpha's command. As the pack mobilized with practiced efficiency, Harper approached Isabella and Mikhail, his expression grave. "This attack changes everything," he said low, keeping his voice from carrying to the increasingly anxious pack members preparing for evacuation. The sounds of rapid preparation created a backdrop of urgency. Containers being packed, communications being transferred, security protocols activated. They're openly killing federal prosecutors now. No more pretense of legality. "Which means they're desperate," Isabella replied. "And desperate people make mistakes." "They also become more dangerous," Mikhail countered. "We need a new approach." Isabella's mind raced through options, discarding each as insufficient until a more radical idea emerged. The familiar clarity of strategic planning began to override her emotional response to the attack. The room's frantic energy seemed to fade as her focus narrowed to the essential elements of their situation. "If they've destroyed our legitimate channels," she said slowly, thoughts crystallizing as she spoke, "we go directly to the public. All of it, every piece of evidence, every recording, every financial record. Released to every media outlet simultaneously." "Including the supernatural elements?" Katerina asked, alarmed. Her stance shifted subtly, preparing for a threat. The question hung in the air, heavy with centuries of secrecy and survival. "No," Isabella clarified, legal precision returning to her words. "We still protect that secret. But everything else, the corruption, the murders, the cover-ups, all of it goes public." She turned to Sophia. "Can you set that up? A mass distribution to media that can't be traced back to us?" Sophia nodded, professional confidence replacing her usual nervous energy. "Yes. I'll need a few hours to secure the channels. But it's possible." Her fingers had already begun moving across the keyboard, planning the technical aspects of the release. "Good," Isabella said. Decision made. Resolution firming her voice. "While they're destroying official channels, we'll go around them completely. Create a massive public outcry that no corruption can contain." As the Warren spun into coordinated evacuation procedures, Isabella felt a cold clarity descend. The rules had changed. The pretense of working within the system was gone. Now it was war. A war for truth, justice, and survival. And she intended to win.